So liquidity and beyond, cross-chain interoperability. So I think like a common theme we've seen throughout the conference has just been on what changes in this industry once we go into a multi-chain world. And I think at the center of this multi-chain world are like these cross-chain interoperability solutions, especially cross-chain like liquidity protocols, and thinking about how do we move value in between blockchains as these ecosystems begin to grow and people demand to move value in between them. So I think we have a great panel full of different projects that are approaching the problem or opportunity differently, as well as projects that can also be composable or also even collaborate with each other as well. So I guess to start, I'd love for you guys just introduce yourselves. I guess starting with you on the end, Chad.
Yeah, my name is Chad Barraford. I'm part of the THORChain community. I'm the technical lead on the project. If you don't know what THORChain is, it's a cross-chain liquidity DEX that allows you to trade layer 1 assets, no wrapped or pegged assets at all. Trade real Bitcoin for real Ethereum, for real Tether, for real Bitcoin Cash, for real Litecoin, all that stuff. That's where our focus is.
Hey everyone, Carson Cook here. I'm happy to see that they put Toke in the 420 slot here. I'm the founder of Tokemak, which is a decentralized protocol for sustainable liquidity in DeFi. Also the founder of Membrane, which has still been in stealth mode. Soon will be unveiled. This is a brand new approach to cross-chain OTC lending, clearing, and settlement. And all these things spun out of my time as a market maker at Fractal.
Hey guys, my name is Sunny. I've been working in the Cosmos ecosystem for the last 4-ish years. So, I've been working on cross-chain stuff since before it was cool. And yeah, so now I work on a project called Osmosis, which is a DEX in the Cosmos ecosystem, focused a lot on cross-chain UX as well as privacy and a bunch of other things that we can talk about.
Cool. So I guess to start, why interoperability now? What has changed over the past year, 6 months that enables us to do this, or blockchains to be interoperable? And like, why is this so important now? Like, kind of what has changed during this time?
I mean, I think part of it is just that the users have just gotten so high, and interoperability at the end of the day was also partially a scalability problem. And we didn't need the scaling solutions until the last year, where up until now we've been in Cosmos we've been telling people that like, hey, you can't just shove everything on main chain Ethereum. It's not going to scale. But until the gas prices hit like $1, even until they hit like $10, we're like, no, it's okay. But once they start hitting the $100, it's like, okay, wait, we do need some sort of scalability. And the way to do that is to have more chains. And now, once you have more chains, well, we still also want to work together. And that's where we finally got that demand for the interoperability.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think we've seen an explosion over the last year or two, and in part because of the work you guys are doing over at Cosmos, of being able to build self-sovereign chains that actually have a lot of real value to them, right? THORChain being one example, Terra is another example, really great projects that are really doing innovative things. And the more kind of fragmentation that leads in terms of liquidity, that kind of creates a bigger problem, which is there's more demand to solve that problem. And in THORChain's case, like we as a team attempted to do this project in 2018, and it didn't work out because the technology and the cryptography wasn't advanced enough at that moment, because Cosmos didn't really quite exist yet in a usable way at that moment. And threshold signatures, which is kind of like a multi-sig, didn't actually exist yet either. And so the paradigm that THORChain kind of puts forward wasn't actually feasible or possible in 2018. And in 2019, when myself and other people started to work on it, the technology, the cryptography, the economics, all those things were suddenly available to the team to be able to build up something that had to be able to translate liquidity from one chain to another chain in a completely decentralized way. That's a transformative moment, and that's a big part of it is because of the work that the cryptographers are doing, the work that Sunny and the Cosmos team are doing, the work that the Polkadot people are working on. All of them are just going to contribute more and more to this space, which is pretty significant.
And just something to kind of layer on top of that, I think from a probably slightly outsider perspective in terms of building these interoperability pieces, I think it's largely been the technologists that were pushing cross-chain interoperability up until 2020. And then I think what we've all discovered is the power of degens, or really the power of incentives are really honey that bees flock to. So the innovation that was DeFi summer, yield farming, mining, staking, all of this stuff that took off in 2020 and just has accelerated in today, attracted users and capital into the Ethereum blockchain. That now is expanding out, and they're looking for higher yields onto these other chains. And so what that means is now it's the right time.
Yeah, I agree. So at a high level, what are the different approaches to cross-chain? Maybe you could just talk about the designs of THORChain and Osmosis Zone.
Yeah, sure. So the approach that Cosmos takes primarily is we created a protocol called IBC, which stands for Inter-Blockchain Communication. And the goal there was to basically make it as trustless and permissionless as possible. So, there's a lot of new cross-chain interoperability protocols that are coming out, but they're really good at connecting what I'll call famous blockchains, where it's like, for example, something like Wormhole, which is, a great protocol, but you have to go ask someone to integrate into Wormhole. You have to get some validator set somewhere to want to run the bridge to your chain. The beauty of IBC is it's a purely on-chain system that allows two chains to talk to each other, and there's no intermediary. There's no one you have to ask for permission, like, hey, can we spin up a bridge? You make a transaction on chain A, you make a transaction on chain B, and they start to talk to each other. That's the beauty of IBC. But then the con, what are the cons? The con is that there's definitely a higher lift to being IBC compatible. You have to basically build light client support for the other chains in your own chain. And this is definitely something that we're working on. And our belief is that this will become as standard as the TCP/IP stack, which is it's in every single OS, right? You just have this one standard thing that's, if you don't have that implemented in your operating system, what are you even doing? And we imagine that IBC will evolve to become like that as well eventually. But in the meanwhile, until that happens, I think there's a lot of intermediary approaches like Wormhole, and I think probably the best decentralized version is of connecting famous blockchains is what THORChain is doing right now.
Yeah. THORChain's approach, when the team started to build the design, it wanted to make sure that they had the minimum amount of requirements on the chain that it's connecting to. And to Sonny's point, you don't have to convince Bitcoin to connect to THORChain. It can just connect because it can just create threshold signature addresses on Bitcoin blockchain, and everything works just seamlessly. So it was important that it had minimum requirements possible, and the only requirement that's really significant from THORChain's perspective is can we just create an address at will? And that's really the most minimum requirement on the entire system. And so being able to connect to either a proof of work or a proof of stake or proof of history or whatever, all these things is kind of not a big deal from THORChain's perspective. It can connect to all these things the same. It can be layer 1, it can be layer 2. All these things are identical from THORChain's perspective because it's completely neutral. As a team, we looked into IBC, and we think IBC is a very well-designed, very well-architected system. But for our purposes, at the time we started to create what we created, it just didn't quite exist yet, for one. But it wasn't quite the right design and structure that we were looking for the design attributes that we were trying to look for.
Mm-hmm. The two kind of buckets of cross-chain interoperability that I think about are, one, the API, the connectivity, the plumbing, and that's admittedly not where Tokemak can plug into this. The other piece is that naturally sort of fragments your liquidity across all these different layers. What you really need is liquidity to be able to flow in a coordinated fashion across all this to really unlock what is coming in DeFi, and also where the metaverse is going, which is going to be a lot weirder than I think any of us in this room can even imagine. So the goal with Tokemak is to basically evolve it into an any-to-any protocol, so we can accept tokens wherever they are. You give it to us on any L1, L2, other chains, et cetera. And then we allow our token holders, which are liquidity directors, to direct that liquidity in a frictionless manner, or as frictionless as possible, to any other venue on any other chain, even if it's a cross-chain venue in the case of your protocols.
Yeah.
I think one way of thinking about it is, so let's say you have many chains that are all trying to talk to each other. And I think there's like maybe 4 different approaches here. So there's one where you can have a centralized operator that like connects all these, all these chains talk to this centralized operator and they act as a bridge. And this is sort of like, the WBTC model, or where it's like, okay, some centralized operator will do all the bridging. Then the second model is you can start to decentralize that operator itself. And so this is what Wormhole does, where they have like, I don't know, 20 validators, like 20 operators or so, and they basically, instead of having one, operator, they have many operators. Then you can go to the third step, taking a step further, which is what THORChain does, and says, hey, instead of just having those 20 operators, let's actually make that hub chain that like talks to everyone be a blockchain in and of itself. And then that blockchain can sort of be this like communication layer between all these chains. And then the final approach is sort of the IBC approach, which is, maybe we don't need a central operator at all. Maybe we can just have all the chains just talk directly to each other. And I think there's like trade-offs on all of these different like methods, and so I think there's like a lot of, I don't think any one solution is the right solution. I think we're going to see like layerings of different solutions on top of each other.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to raise. So in a world where you do have multiple solutions, or you need multiple solutions to solve this problem, what are some ways that you could see yourselves like collaborating with each other? I mean, obviously, Carson, you mentioned being able to basically direct liquidity throughout all these different networks, potentially using some of these exchanges as well. But I guess maybe this is the question for everyone. How do you see ways that you can kind of work together to kind of solve this opportunity?
One of the things I'd like to see happen is a unification of the application layer semantics. So what that means is, when I talk about IBC, there's really like 2 things going on, right? There's the protocol that's like this, like how chains are talking to each other and how they understand each other. And then there's the like formatting of the data that's actually being sent between chains, right? Like whether we're doing a token transfer or we're doing a cross-chain swap, or we're sending an NFT across chain, or Oracle data across chains. Like there's all these like application layer semantics. And I think what would be the best thing to happen right now is a lot of these cross-chain communication protocols should start to standardize on the application layer semantics. So the data format of whether I'm sending a token over IBC or over Wormhole or over like threshold ECDSA system, like it'll be nice if that data packet was the same, and so that will just make it so much easier for all the integrators to, you can abstract away what's the cross-chain communication protocol being used as long as the actual data format is the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely agree with everything you just said. I think kind of to package that up a different way, the future's composable. Everything that is to come, the metaverse is going to run cross-chain. There's going to be this decision, which is often going to be done at the protocol or the application layer, which is speed and cost versus security and finality. And that will determine where it happens on these different chains or different layers. And I think importantly, the more that we can abstract this away, like this becomes powerful when the user doesn't even know about this. This is very much like you were saying, TCP, IP, early days of the internet. Like no one should know any of these terms that we all, or many of us in this room, understand. It should all be abstracted away, put under the hood, and optimized at a coordinated level.
But ideally, that makes sense, but practically, it's very difficult, right? History is chock full of different technologies that are competing, and they all exist in the same system. Even just like if you want to plug into an electrical outlet in America versus Europe, it's a different system. And will it ever merge into one? Yeah, probably not, right? And so having a universal kind of protocol like Sunny's talking about ideally makes a lot of sense. I sincerely doubt we'll ever get there. I think because each one of these blockchains is starkly designed differently than other ones, whether you're talking about Solana to Bitcoin to IOTA, something like this, all of them are just structurally like completely different. It's not like different forms of MySQL. You have like Maria in MySQL and like other forms of that, and like SQLite and these things, like where they're structurally very similar. It's actually quite the opposite, where like every blockchain is just structured so differently that to have a universal system between them is just, I would think, to be completely impractical at this moment. That if we're going to build that, Satoshi should have thought of that, back in the old days. And obviously I wouldn't have thought about it if I was Satoshi either. But like that ship has basically sailed in my mind. And so I think that's why, in part, THORChain thinks about it. It's like we just have to connect as this one system to connect to whatever standards or mechanisms that each individual chain has, and think about, okay, how can we get a universal way of talking to everything, but respecting each design differently, because everything is going to be changed differently or designed differently. And in the future, things are going to change even more. We're not going to like stay on proof of work. Proof of work is probably done in terms of like new chains being like created, because how are you going to secure it? Like, it's really hard to do. Like, Bitcoin had 6 years of a kind of headway to like secure its blockchain before anybody really cared enough to like 51% attack it. So building proof of work chains now is just like this is a lot harder. Now we predominantly do like proof of stake networks. That's like the vast majority of new chains being created are exactly that, and that's that way for a good reason, I'd say.
Yeah. So what are some use cases that you all think will be unlocked by cross-chain composability? So we talk about how cool it is that we can move value between blockchains. It's like cool, but like what are we doing with this, and why does that even matter in the first place?
Well, I would say that like every blockchain has its own unique value and attributes that are valuable, right? So for Bitcoin, you might say it's like a really great store of value because it prioritizes decentralization and security over pretty much anything else. And you might say that Monero gives value because it has privacy built into, or Zcash or something like this. And so being able to transact and move freely from one chain to the next allows you to access the attributes of whatever blockchain that you're kind of in the mood to. You want the DeFi protocols, you want the store of value, you want the privacy aspects to it. It doesn't matter. You can just kind of like get those things when you want them and as you need them, like in the moment. And that's like super powerful, right? Like that's what we should all have, that in a completely decentralized way. The fact that we rely on Binance or Kraken or whatever to like get us across chain right now is fucking ludicrous. Like it goes against the entire ethos of crypto, of like decentralization and peer-to-peer transactions. Like, why are we just like okay with the idea of using Binance all the time to transact between Ethereum and Bitcoin? It's just like nonsensical. We do it, but it's nonsensical. And so being able to move in that way, of being able to move in a decentralized way, using Osmosis, using THORChain, using whatever, is like critically important and a basic pillar that crypto like absolutely needs. Not like it'd be cool to have, it'd be kind of fun, wouldn't it? It's like, we need this, right? Absolutely need this. And I think that Osmosis and THORChain and a bunch of other projects are working very hard to move the entire space to where it needs to be.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I think we always talk about how we're building this crypto economy, but at the same time, we still have many of these different centralized institutions that sit in between these decentralized applications that we all want to use. And if that's the case, then how decentralized is this industry truly? If you can actually, once you have kind of put your capital into one of these ecosystems, you still need to exit just to move to different blockchains. So totally agree there. So I guess maybe one more thing kind of on like what would be unlocked around cross-chain composability. I guess like Carson, like how does cross-chain start to inform, I really just a question for the panel, start to inform the strategy for different applications that are launching on, maybe right now, you're only deployed on Ethereum, or maybe you're deployed on Ethereum and maybe like Arbitrum, or maybe you're just deployed in Avalanche. There's different strategies that I think many different projects are employing. But now that you have different ways for these blockchains to communicate with each other, and also you have activity on many of these other chains as well, right? So it's easier for capital to flow into. How does that change how you think about deploying on different blockchains and competition, collaboration?
So I think the distinction that's worth making is the term I use is the multi-chain versus the interchain. The multi-chain is this idea that's like, I guess, kind of common right now, which is like, okay, we're gonna have all these L1s, and they're all gonna start like interacting with each other. So meanwhile, the interchain is this very application-specific mindset. And so in the multi-chain world, you have like, okay, there's like 10 different EVM-compatible chains, and then Sushi is going around and being like, all right, we're gonna deploy here, we're gonna deploy here, we're gonna deploy here, and you're just gonna split your liquidity everywhere and like, not provide this cohesive experience. The interchain vision says, no, that's wrong. What we need to do is provide one application-specific chain that will connect to all the other chains, all the other application-specific chains. And so, if you look at the DeFi blue chips, who gets it is Compound, right? Compound's like, no, we're not going to do Aave. We're not going to like deploy on 10 different chains. We're going to build Compound chain, and then everything is going to connect to Compound chain, and we're going to become the main lending facility for all of crypto. And so Compound gets it, THORChain gets it, Osmosis gets it. Like the future is not many L1s. The future is application-specific blockchains, and I have a bet with someone that like, I think I have 2 years left on the bet that Maker will be its own chain within like 2 years. I'm pretty sure I'm going to win that bet. So I think that's really how the interchain, this cross-chain world is going to move forward.
But I think, if I'm not mistaken, Compound, the way that it connects between chains is EVM-based, if I'm not mistaken, right? And so if you're going to leave out 60% of the liquidity of crypto, it's like, this isn't, to me, is not a viable option, because you're not going to try to convince the larger community of just like, okay, I need to get from point A to point B, what are my 10 options, and then measure all these 10 options, and then figure out the one that can do the thing that I'm trying to do. I think what people are going to navigate towards or just naturally adopt is a thing of like, I want to go from chain A to chain B. Okay, I go to THORChain, and it just supports it all. So I don't need to make any choices. I don't need to make any complexities. I can just say, I want Bitcoin. I want to move to Atom or whatever, and it just works without needing the complexity of like trying to figure out each individual system and which one works in my case. That to me is a non-starter, just completely non-starter. If you're going to exclude even a minority of liquidity, of like crypto liquidity, you're already starting off from the white paper. You're starting off at a bad place. You need to say, if you want to be a serious DeFi protocol in the future, you need to support like 99 or 98% of the total liquidity. Even the 5 chains that THORChain supports currently, that's already like 92 or 93% of the entire crypto liquidity of like the entire crypto space, which is like humongous by itself. I know, and the community will add more chains in time and change it from 92 to 95 to probably 99 at some point. But like, you need to access all of that liquidity to have the most trades, the most activity, the most value being transacted to that network. If you're just going to be like an Ethereum-based protocol and just tap into like 25% of liquidity, it's like you're starting off at the wrong place, and you're really not going to get very far. I'm sorry.
I'll answer the question in a little different way. I'm going to get a little more specific to. Regardless of which of these kind of future visions is the future, right now in today's world where you have blockchains of different speeds, different cost, et cetera, right now with, I love Ethereum. I live on Ethereum L1 often, but it's really I think the thesis of whale chain is probably right. Like, you're pricing out so many people from it. It doesn't make sense at the moment for a lot of people. We call them shrimps in the industry, right? But with normal people to trade, lend, and in the future game on there. So I think the sort of the decision point that applications will have, if you take the assumption that they're going to be building on the things that the different chains and L2s that we see right now will be, what type of transaction throughput is it? How much can a user stomach, or a protocol-to-protocol interaction stomach in terms of what they'll pay in fees, and then you sort of determine the best chain or chains to deploy based on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you guys kind of mentioned that you think that the role of this kind of general purpose smart contract platform as like the single dominant platform that everyone is kind of using to transact on is probably not where we're going. So I guess follow-up there would be, what role do you think that general purpose smart contract platforms will play in this future? Will it be more specialized, like based on their go-to-market strategy, or maybe just the way that they're designed is just more fitting for certain use cases, or will everything just go application specific?
I think for me, smart contracting in general, from the onset, doesn't actually make a lot of sense from my perspective, right? And the reason why that is we've learned through the history of like internet technology, right, over the last 20, 30 years, whatever, that if you are building a serious application, you are not going to build it in an environment that you don't control, right? So there's like a thing called Heroku, right, on the interwebs, whatever, and you can build a Ruby on Rails app and like launch it in a weekend, and you can like abstract away all the security and like all those things, and like have a really low-hanging fruit way of like launching a cool concept. But there are no apps in the Web 2.0 that use Heroku that are like actually serious applications. You use it for like hobbies and like sandboxing and like proof of concepts and this kind of thing, because any serious engineer, any serious developer wants as much control over their environment as possible, which is why like Cosmos is like super powerful, because I have, as a Cosmos engineer, I have much more control of that environment than I do over Ethereum. I can do much more, it's a much more powerful environment to build upon rather than a smart contract in Ethereum, for example. So we do it now because building your own chain is a lot more difficult than it is to like launch a smart contract, right? And if I want to move from Heroku to like my own infrastructure and like get an AWS account and like spin up a load balancer and a MySQL database and like all these things, and that's like a lot more engineering and work that takes into account for that. But I will totally do that because it's well worth my time to do so. And so I think the future is not actually going to be smart contracting, because you do not want to have some other random app in the Ethereum world that's causing problems on your app, making your app like not usable because the shrimps can't use it, to use your phrase. You want to build your system where like I have my own isolated environment, I control it completely. It's more difficult because I have to bootstrap security along with TVL and all these things, but it's well worth the engineering effort to do so.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. I think, like if you're building anything real, production scale, with real numbers of users, you need your own chain. That's really the only way you can get the level of scalability, but also just the level of customization that you need to provide the best UX for your product. And so I think that's inevitable. I think smart contract chains can, like you mentioned, prototyping. I think maybe the fastest way to test out new ideas is on a smart contract chain, and then once it hits like some sort of level of product market fit, then you start breaking it off into new chains, like I predicted what will happen with Maker, or is happening with Compound right now. And I think the other thing is smart contracting is still useful as like a add-on to like application-specific chains. So like there's a tool in the Cosmos ecosystem called CosmWasm. It's a WebAssembly-based smart contracting thing. I think what will happen is on all these chains, the core real logic will still be in like the native code of the chain. And then the smart contracting thing will be there just for people to add like add-ons and customization. But the real core functionality will still probably not be in the smart contracting system.
Yeah.
So how does this affect in this world where I guess really what you're talking about is that we will still have composability. It's just that it will be asynchronous. So it won't all just be on a single blockchain. It will be on many blockchains that it can compose each other on an asynchronous basis. What does this do to the user experience? And are there like benefits to having, I think, the opposite, where for example with Tokemak, like you can just easily route liquidity all throughout Ethereum. Everything's lived in the same chain, all has the same security. You don't have to go and reason about integration with a new project and trying to see like, oh, like how does it secure itself? Like what is the direction of this security? Is it getting more secure or less secure? Because I think it does propose its own unique set of challenges.
Yeah, I think there's definitely advantages like you were saying there, but I mean, I think the writing's kind of on the wall, right? I kicked this off by saying Tokemak's actually looking to go beyond Ethereum, right? We know that it's more expansive than just Ethereum L1. So to me, liquidity is really bandwidth in this ecosystem. A lot of people don't talk about this, but data flow in Web 2 is being replaced with value flow in Web 3. And if you think about what plays the role of bandwidth in this ecosystem, it's liquidity. So there's the question of fragmentation and moving it. That's something that Tokemak and also the rest of us here on stage are trying to address. But really interestingly, the other piece is the tunneling problem, which is how long it takes to move sideline liquidity or orphaned liquidity in one place over to one. And often it's different there's a different time for the two different directions of transfer. And so someone needs to solve that. That's definitely, if people can get that, then these things I think can start being abstracted under, and you can have really powerful user applications that are kind of composable across these things.
I think one thing with the asynchronous side of like, yes, I've heard this a lot where people are like, oh, I'm skeptical of cross-chain because of the asynchronicity, the non-atomicness. But like, look at web development. None of web development is synchronous and atomic. You have to do everything asynchronously because that's the only thing the internet can work. It's web scale, right? And if we want blockchains to become that level, we have to move to this model. And what will happen is the tooling will just get better over time. Rewind 10, 15 years, asynchronous programming in JavaScript was annoying, right? You got into callback hell and everything. But over time, the tooling just got better. You get like, nice. JavaScript has just evolved so much in the last few years that like it actually is easy to do asynchronous programming now. And I think the same thing is going to happen in blockchains as well, where like the tooling is going to just get better and better. And I think this is what we're doing in Cosmos, where like, everyone else right now is starting to think about cross-chain communication. We've been thinking about it for 3 years. We've built it, we've shipped it, and now we're focused on like cross-chain composability and like how do we make these UX flows across chains like as user-friendly and seamless as possible. And one of the goals of Osmosis, like we have an entire team dedicated to just cross-chain UX because our goal is to show the world that cross-chain UX will be as good as single-chain UX.
All right, well, that's time. Thank you guys for the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Now is cocktail hour, right? Cool.
Thanks.
Don't go anywhere just yet.